There's a short video on speaker cable, and when you look at speaker cable, there's actually quite a lot of different choices, and unfortunately that's not our complete range. In fact, a lot of speaker cable we're actually buying in. So you can sort of divide it up between your generic type speaker cable, which is DOS, and that ranges in very thin low gauge cable up to thick gauge cable, and then you've also got DOS high quality, which is including a few little nifty features. You have Atlas, which is very much an audio-centric brand. A lot of their stuff is made in Scotland. You've got Forte down here, which is Aussie-made cable, 16 gauge. They've got a 2 and a very popular 4-core cable. And you've got Eurocable, which is a really popular choice for the commercial industry. Italian-made cable, that one. Okay, so we've got 3 different speaker cables. Not very well presented, but you've got your generic speaker cable, which we always talk about the gauge of the cable. They're all oxygen-free copper. A lot of these will come in a clear cover. That's just to make sure that the copper is actually oxygen-free. There's no oxygenization. Not that that's a big issue. You'll have a tracer line on one side, on this side, which I put to the red terminal, and then the other one's, in this case, unmarked. All you need is scissors to cut it, scissors to separate it. Use something like a cable stripper here to strip it. So why not give you an example? I like these cable strippers. They're very easy to use. So this bit locks down on the cable, and then the other bit actually strips it. So if we're going to do this cable, you really can't do it. You can't really go wrong. But that's it. So locks down and then separates it, and then super fast. So if you do speaker cables often, then yeah, get a stripper like that. So generic, where the gauge is important. Don't trust any brand, because quite often they will use copper clad aluminium because it's cheaper, and that's crazy because you've got to have a really thick cable to have the equivalent of copper. So make sure that you trust the vendor. It's got to be oxygen-free copper, but most decent vendors will have oxygen-free copper, so you have that one. And different gauges are available. Yeah, I would say the default is either 16 gauge, which is a 2x96, or a 12 gauge, which is a 2x308 in the current range. You have these, Eurocable, which great manufacturer out of Italy, and I particularly like Eurocable when you've got many speakers running off a single cable. So in my house, I've got an amplifier with 9 channels, and so I've got a couple of big chunky bits of cable that have many conductors inside it. In this case, the 2 common ones that we stock look like this, which is a 02N40 for the 12 gauge, or a 02N25, which is a 16 gauge. Some of the nice things that the Italian manufacturers have, you'll notice straight away the feeling of the PVC. So the outer layer is nice, flexible, feels good on the hands. Actually, one thing to mention about these cables, when you've got these kinds of speaker cables, it's super easy using cable strippers like this. When you're doing cables like this, you probably, if you do it like me and you make a little cut around the outside, it never actually cuts properly, and you're left with this kind of thing. The thing to remember is, if you are left with that, go around until the right point and just bend it upon itself, and that's the easiest way of making a little cut without nicking, as we see there. So you can tell that they're a very quality manufacturer. Eurocable mainly supply the professional sector. They don't really focus on consumers. So check out that Eurocable. You'll also have brands like this, Atlas. Atlas have a couple of popular models. So I've been playing with this one, but this one's called an Element 2, which is a 14 gauge, and then you have an Equator, which is also a 14 gauge, but you'll notice the construction's very different. We'll talk about those later. When you're going a generic brand, often they'll use banana terminals like these, which we call a PW1639 or a PW1640, and they'll consist of 3 parts. So if we were going to put it into this cable, 12 gauge, it's nice to feed it in from the back. In fact, very rarely would I feed it into the side. Once you've stripped the cable, it'll probably be easier than the way I do it, but you just splay the cable a bit here and screw it on. Make sure you've got a good contact. If you want to put heat shrink over the top, it's 12mm heat shrink, so if you're on our website, HS12 and whatever colour you want. And so that's it through the back, so it's a nice connection. If you're going through the side, same kind of deal. You don't need as much copper in the side. And so up to you how you want to do it. If you've got exposed copper, it's always good to tin the copper to avoid oxygen getting in, and so that's in the side. You'll see brands will do that in different ways. You've got ones like here. There's the Atlas that I was playing with before. Their equivalent, Z plug. They do 2. They do a Z plug plus they do a spade terminal. Spade terminals are quite good, and look it up on the product page. We have a link to it. They're quite good when you've got a busy back of the amplifier or something. But these are the more popular ones. So you stick this little gold-plated bit over the top, and then this is the bit that's getting in contact with your say your speaker terminal at the back of your speaker, or your amplifier. So that goes over the top, and then you crimp it. In this case, RG58 crimper. I would suggest, for crimpers, I love the Hanlong ones. Hanlong's a Taiwanese manufacturer. There's an HT106D, and they just make really good crimping tools, and nice big solid bits of metal there for good crimping. And so you just stick that in there and then crimp it on. I put one terminal on the other end of the cable just to see how it all looks, and you'll notice there's no soldering. So I stuck on the end on here, and then I took it off, and it sort of shows you how the contacts are. So you've got all this metal preventing oxygen getting in, and at this end you've got all the copper, which is the conductive copper, which will be sitting in the end of the terminal. Some of the things I like about the more expensive Z plugs as opposed to the banana ones is that you get full contact around here, whereas the banana ones, it's just made to make some pressure around the edges. So if you've got a good budget, then those Z plugs are a step up. So yeah, you put it on, screw it on, and then you're right to go. They also have another accessory, which is a bootleg, which certainly pretties it up once I can unscrew this. Excuse me. And but the bootleg, I would the entry-level element, which is sort of like the reference for an entry-level speaker cable, you probably wouldn't be using a bootleg for that. You'll probably use it for their thicker Equator, which is a higher level one. And yeah, you'll notice that the construction of the cable is different, but a bootleg looks like this, and so you just stick it over the top, and yeah, you'd snip off all the bits and pull the cable through, and then heat shrink it. And obviously the finish of these with these heat shrinks is much nicer. Thanks for tuning in.